I've said it before, and I'll say it again. When the church doesn't quite hear the Spirit speaking in the stories we tell, sometimes the Spirit speaks at us from outside in other stories. We're going multimedia today. Stand by.
It is literally impossible to be a woman. You are so beautiful and so smart, and it kills me that you don't think you're good enough. Like, we have to always be extraordinary. But somehow we're always doing it wrong. Like, you have to be thin, but not too thin. And you can never say you want to be thin. You have to say you want to be healthy, but also you have to be thin. You have to have money, but you can't ask for money because that's crass. You have to be a boss, but you can't be mean. You have to lead, but you can't squash other people's ideas. You're supposed to love being a mother, but don't talk about your kids all the damn time. You have to be a career woman, but also always be looking out for other people. You have to answer for men's bad behavior, which is insane, but if you point that out, you're accused of complaining. You're supposed to stay pretty for men, but not so pretty that you tempt them too much or that you threaten other women, because you're supposed to be a part of the sisterhood, but always stand out and always be grateful. But never forget that the system is rigged, so find a way to acknowledge that, but also always be grateful. You have to never get old, never be rude, never show off, never be selfish, never fall down, never fail, never show fear, never get out of line. It's too hard, it's too contradictory, and nobody gives you a medal or says thank you. And it turns out, in fact, that not only are you doing everything wrong, but also everything is your fault. I'm just so tired of watching myself and every single other woman tie herself into knots so that people will like us. And if all of that is also true for a doll, just representing a woman, then I don't even know.
Name the film. Barbie. The first thing I want to say to men is, if you're thinking, hey, I feel like that sometimes too, I believe you. Let that be your doorway into empathy and curiosity, and not denial and dismissal. Right, men? Empathy for what might be the same, curiosity about what might be different for women, even if we can identify with those things as well, from this great monologue by America Ferrera. This weekend, the Episcopal Church is celebrating the 50th anniversary of the ordination of women in our communion. There has been so much work done to remove some of the contradictory standards that this monologue represents in the church. And there is so much still left to do. It's not enough to give women the title, not enough to put a collar on a woman. There is so much deeper cultural change that needs to happen for us to fully recognize the leadership of women in the church. I have myself seen so many fellow clergy who are women tied up in knots, as the movie says, not just so people will like them, but just so that they can do their gosh dang jobs as priests, as deacons, and as bishops. And one of the things that I see time and time again that gets women clergy tied up in knots is the precise contradiction of this, that we judge women as weak leaders unless they act like men in leadership, and we judge women as nasty and unlikable when they act like men do. Yeah? And I can't help but read today's gospel through this anniversary that we're celebrating, through what I have heard from other women, clergy, through these contradictions that we still struggle with in our society and in our church. And I've never read this story this way before, but I want to invite you into this familiar thing about the feeding of the 5,000 and ask some questions about what it says about our expectations of what makes a good leader, what counts as masculine and feminine, what counts as men's work and women's work. So this is probably a story almost all of you could kind of just recite from memory, right? You know the basic beats. There's a problem. Jesus has all these people. Jesus and his disciples have all these people who have followed them. They are overwhelmed. They're tired. Jesus has promised them a vacation, and lo and behold, the office has called. The phone is going off the hook. The phone is buzzing constantly. People need something. We can't get a moment's rest. And even as the day is ending, the disciples are tired. They see the people are hungry. They say, Jesus, send all these people away. They need to eat. And Jesus, perhaps not the most sensitive to his disciples' needs, but hey, that's what being a leader sometimes means too, says, you give them something to eat. Let this be your problem. And then they, I think, have just had it at that point. And they reach for something, I think, deep-seated in them. They reach for what has been told to them about what it means to be a leader and what it means to be a man. What is their response to this problem? What is the place that they go to right away? We don't have 200 denarii of money to buy enough bread for all these people. They literally step into the role of breadwinner, that masculine role of breadwinner. They get practical, they get financial, they get hard, and you can hear the aggression and anger in their voice, I think. Because anger is the one emotion men are permitted to display publicly, right? They're expressing a manly sort of leadership, getting into the concrete and practical details. And I can hear Jesus kind of sighing when they get into that space, like, okay, dudes, chill. Let's just start with not talking about what you don't have. Let's start with what you do have. What do we got? What do we have to work with? 5 loaves, 2 fishes. Okay, good. Next step. And here's the important thing. Here is the critical thing about this story, is a one sentence that's terribly mistranslated. So when we read this story, it says, he ordered them to get all the people to sit down in groups on the green grass. Horrible. Horrible translation. It sounds like he's like, tell them to sit, like they're dogs or something. Here is what Jesus actually told them to do. Get the people not to sit down, but to recline. Recline, because that is the posture that you assume when you're having a formal dinner with people. When you go over to somebody's house and you're at the dining table. In Roman society, they didn't sit in chairs, they reclined on couches and ate kind of luxuriously like this, right? Yeah. That's what he's saying to them. Get them to recline. And not just recline in groups. The word is symposiums. Everyone remember, Philosophy 100, if you ever took that class, symposiums in, Greek society? These were casual dinner parties where people discussed important ideas. You have your friends over, let's talk about the issues of the day and, eat some cheese, right? Talk about things that really matter. Connect with your friends. symposium. It's this nice gathering of, the wine and the ideas are flowing. And then finally, the green grass. So here's the thing about Mark. Mark is a man of few words, or woman of few words. He doesn't get into nice little details like this. This is one of the few examples where he specifies it's green grass. This is a luxurious place. This is a place of rest. This is a place that recalls Psalm 23. Verdant pastures. This is Galilee State Park, maybe. Get the people to recline in symposiums on the green grass. Create the atmosphere of an elegant dinner party. Because, dear disciples, dear men, doing things like that is also showing good leadership. Leadership also means knowing how to play hostess, how to be homemaker, how to be nurturer and includer and a calming presence. And men in leadership need to develop and show those kinds of skills every bit as much as the practical, the hard, the financial, concrete skills that we often associate with being in charge. Because look what happens next in the story. When the disciples are told, and Jesus invites them to play hostess to this grand dinner party out on the grass, what happens next? Now, just like in the raising of Jairus' daughter a few weeks ago, if you were here for that, Mark doesn't tell us the mechanism of the miracle. He doesn't say that then God came down and rained bread on the people. What actually happens next is very much left up to our imaginations of where that bread and fish came from. So here's a possibility. If you like the idea of God raining bread down, you can hold on to that. Here's another way we might read this story. You get all these hungry people, anxious, they know it's getting late. You get all of them to relax, to chill. Please, have a seat, recline on this green grass. Get to know your neighbor. Let's start talking, right? It's all going to be all right. Get people to calm down, and then you take your 5 loaves and your 2 fish, and you start passing them around to people, and then the people who are relaxed and calm and getting to know one another start pulling out their knapsacks, the food that they probably brought with them on this journey, and they start pulling out bread and fish, the food that they've got. They start sharing from what they have, and suddenly there is more than enough for everybody. And that happens because the disciples developed a new set of leadership skills. This kind of story helps us break apart that impossible contradiction that we place women leaders in, that contradiction of you have to lead like a man but don't be like a man. Because that contradiction actually starts with us, my fellow men. It's the contradiction that we carry, a contradiction against our true selves. It starts with the things we have always been told about what makes a man a man. Being hard, aggressive, practical, strong. There's nothing wrong with those things. But, number one, those qualities don't only belong to men. Those qualities don't only belong to men. And, number 2, why limit ourselves to that narrow scope of what it means to be a leader and what it means to be a human being? God created each of us as whole human beings, each and every one of us fully the image of our Creator, each fully capable of all the ways of being in the world. Practical, inspirational, emotional, aggressive, nurturing, hard, soft, strong, receptive, protecting, including. These are not contradictions. These are qualities we see God displaying in all the scriptures. These are skills that every good leader knows how to use. These are our divine inheritance. Women's liberation, my fellow men, is our liberation too. And I'm sorry if nobody has told you that before now. Liberation, it's our liberation to be fully human, fully who God has created us to be. One last note. Something that's always bugged me about this particular version of the feeding of the 5,000 is the way it ends. Do you know, you might have noticed all along it's saying the people, right? The people, the people, the people. And then you get to the very end to kind of, it's the punctuation mark at the end. It says, 5,000 who were fed? Men. Why? And this is the thing, is that Mark very, very specifically used the word men when he could have used the more gender-inclusive word. Why just men? This is a stretch. I know this is a stretch, but I'm going to keep reading it this way, and until somebody tells me that I'm wrong, and probably that won't even matter. Here's how I take it. It's because the men experienced that miracle that day in a deeper way. Because what they saw, those 5,000 men, is that they saw 12 other men being a different kind of leader, being men who defied society's roles, being men who displayed their full humanity and thereby accomplished amazing things, accomplished impossible things, just by expanding what they thought that they had to do as men and as leaders. This is what's necessary for liberation, for women's liberation, for men's liberation, for everyone's liberation, is men showing other men, showing boys, the fullness of who God created all of us to be. Amen.